Alright, welcome back to the continued video series on content marketing. The examples that you looked at, the videos that you looked at, gave some really interesting examples of companies which have leveraged content marketing to their advantage. For example, think about the Blendtec blenders. They've really dominated by creating that entire additional content channel, which focuses not so much so on the product but on all the different things that the product can do. It's a very quirky idea, but at the end of the day it's still giving more visibility to the brand, and you don't really have to spend as much time talking about the specific features and the specific details of the product. Take the example of Red Bull. I think Red Bull does an exceptional job, and they've done such an exceptional job that today I would extremely happily just pay to access the content which Red Bull is producing. I mean, definitely, of course, their core product, which is the drink itself, but I think their entire content strategy has evolved into a brand, into an animal of its own. But essentially, the conclusion which I'm driving towards with all of this is that content is essential in today's world for you to be able to market effectively. Forget about marketing effectively, content is important where it can essentially become a brand of its own. It's just that important. With this, let's discuss around some specifics on content ideas. Let's say you're planning to buy a car. Which of these articles are you most likely to read? Is it the article, the first one, 2019 update, top 25 cars in India? Uh, or article number two, the top four things every first time Indian car buyer should know? Or article number three, five ways to reduce the interest burden on your car loan? Remember, you're planning to buy a car for the first time. Which of these articles are you most likely to read? Just circle down your responses and we'll come back to this question later. Think of another situation. Let's say you're planning to go on your first date. Which of these articles are you most likely to read before going on your first date? Article number one, four things to do to convert the first date into a second one. Article number two, the ultimate guide for dating. Article number three, my bad date experience and what I learned. Remember, you can only read one of these articles. Which article are you most likely to read? Now I'll take some educated guess here, but if I have to think about the first example that we discussed, the one around cars, if you're a first time car buyer, you're most likely to read, if you could read just one article, you're most likely to read article number two, which is the top four things every first time Indian car buyer should know. And the reason you'd want to read that article is because right from its title, it is able to attract you and target you directly, right? It talks about the main things that you should know. It's targeting the first time car buyer, it's targeting the Indian car market, and it's talking about the essential things that you should know before you make that first car purchase. And so it really touches the main pain point or the key pain point which I might be looking to solve, or the key essential area which I might be looking information around if I'm a first time car buyer. And I know just by looking at the title of this article that there is definitely some value in it for me. If I look at the first option, the 29 update, the top 25 cars in India, I might or might not get any substantial value out of reading that. If I look at the third one, of course, that's interesting. I will definitely read it, maybe at a later stage when I'm further down in my car buying process, but that will not necessarily be the first item, the first article that I'll read. What about the other scenario which we discussed? You're planning to go on your first date. Which of these articles are you most likely to read before? My guess would be that you'd want to read the four things to do to convert the first date into a second one. And the reason for this would be you want something which is specific for that first date. Sure, if you had enough time, if you had a lot of time, you could refer to the ultimate guide for dating. But typically, when a person is going into that first date, the objective is, especially if that first date is with someone you're like, then the objective is how can I take that first date and convert it into a second one? And hence, this article kind of touches that need, touches that requirement which the audience really has. Of course, there's this article, there's one interesting point to be made here, my bad date experience and what I learned. Of course, there are a lot of people in the audience who might be shy, who have not had a very active dating life, and hence those people might be more inclined towards reading this article because they're not really sure whether they'll even be able to get a second date. They just want to make sure that they don't end up with a bad first date experience, and hence this article could be read, would be the preferred choice for a bunch of people. Of course, you have noted down what options you wanted to read first. That will definitely indicate what it is that you're looking for, where you are in that buyer's journey, what mindset you are in as a buyer. But at the end of the day, this is what it all boils down to. It boils down to the why, right? It boils down to what is most relevant to what the audience is looking for, what you're looking for. That's why I said that at the end of the day, what you will look for is what is most critical for you at that point in time. And because what is most relevant for you at that point in time is such an essential factor, having the right content is just not enough. Having the right content is just not enough. You need to be able to deliver that content at the right place and at the right time. And this is essentially where the rest of the concepts which we talked about the marketing channels, we talked about the marketing campaigns, and that's how all of those other concepts essentially tie into content marketing, right? And see, when you tie the content with the place and the time, essentially what you get is you get context, right? So for example, think about me receiving a link to an article or seeing an article on LinkedIn. Let's say I'm up late working in the middle of the night. Let's say I find an article on LinkedIn which says, are you feeling high levels of stress during your job? Here are 4 ways to reduce the level of stress that you might be feeling. Now that is perfect timing for such an article to pop up because it's hitting me at the right time, it's hitting me in the right context. I'm seeing it online, which is where I spend all pretty much 90 to 80% of my waking hours, and that article coming up to me at that place and that time really makes a lot of sense. And hence what I want to point out is that you need to evolve from just doing content marketing to really being able to move into context marketing, because unless you understand the context, just having the content isn't enough. You might be a master of words, you might be able to write beautiful prose, you might be able to write beautiful poetry, but unless you really understand the context, you will not be successful. And understanding the context starts with understanding the buyer's persona and understanding the buyer's journey. And that's what you need to start doing to be able to move on to being a context marketeer versus just a content marketeer.